Takulandirani ku AMTV Malawi kuchimake kwa nkhani zenizeni. Ngati nkhani imeneyo kuno kulibe, dziwani kuti nkhani imeneyo ndi yabodza.
Let us pray. Almighty God, who in your wisdom and goodness has appointed the office of the rulers and parliaments for the welfare of society and the just government of the people, we ask you to behold with your abundant favors your servants, whom you have been pleased to call to the performance of important trusts in this land. Let your blessings descend upon us here assembled, and grant that we may treat and consider all matters that shall come under deliberation in so just and faithful a manner as to promote your honor and glory, and to advance the peace, prosperity, and welfare of this country, and of those whose interests you have committed to our charge. Amen.
General business, communication from the chair.
Good afternoon, honorable members, and welcome back from the weekend. I have no communication to make.
Government business, motion on the 2024-2025 mid-year budget review.
Honorable members, we are now supposed to get responses from the opposition spokesperson on finance. What is the honorable member for Charles Central? Why are you rising?
Thank you very much, Madam Speaker, and good afternoon. Regardless of whichever side of the House, Madam, the response that the DPP spokesperson on finance is as equally important as a statement by the Minister of Finance as it shapes this country in matters relating to finance. If you look at this House, Madam Speaker, is almost empty, and I'm very, very concerned whether indeed you will be responding to a House that is as empty as this is. I would therefore have probably request your office to consider a roll call for now, so that probably we could have a few to come, so that as he presents indeed to representatives of the people on the ground. But I submit for your consideration. I submit.
Honorable member, if you want a roll call, all we need is a movement of a motion from you, sir. If you want a motion, if you want a roll call, we need a motion. Yes, government leader, deputy leader.
Right Honorable Speaker, good afternoon. Just to put it on the record, we formed a quorum for this meeting, but also to say that the statement from the DPP spokesperson will be shared to all honorable members of this House, their response. So that is okay. We may proceed. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Honorable Leader of the House. Honorable members, can we proceed? Let's proceed, Honorables. DPP spokesperson. Spokesperson of DPP, you have 30 minutes. 30.
Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Madam Speaker, I wish to express my gratitude to you for giving the opportunity to the Democratic Progressive Party, DPP, to respond to the 2024-2025 mid-year budget statement delivered in this August House by the Minister of Finance, Economic Affairs, Honorable Simplex Kitchula Banda, MP, on 4th of December 2024. Before I proceed, Madam Speaker, allow me to register my gratitude to my President, Professor Arthur Peter Mutharika, for his trusted and proven leadership, and for giving the people of Chirazo South, people of Tie Kadewere, Tie Nkalo, Tie Mpunga, and Sabutie Maoni, to respond to the midterm statement on behalf of the mighty Democratic Progressive Party and all Malawians. Madam Speaker, let me remind this August House that DPP's interest is to provide constructive guidance in developing Malawi and thereby rescuing the country from the current state of economic collapse since June 2020. Madam Speaker, this noble duty of purpose has to be done in order to prevent the destruction of the economy by this MCP government. We do this because we love our country and we love Malawian people. As the Democratic Progressive Party, we are very democratic and we follow the rule of law. We are progressive and development-oriented, and we take the welfare of Malawians seriously. However, DPP is worried as the country is in a self-destruction mode through deliberate acts of plunder and sheer neglect by the current government. In all the policies that DPP undertakes, we prioritize the Malawi economy and Malawian people to ensure that the lives of the vulnerable people are protected. We make sure they always have food throughout the year. They have proper housing, they live a healthy life by ensuring that our hospitals have adequate medicines and that patients can afford and that parents can afford to send their children to school. That's why, Madam Speaker, we are proud to call ourselves Democratic Progressive Party. During the time DPP was in government, that is from 2004 to 2012, where, Madam Speaker, you were part of us at that time. When we worked to change this economy, you were there in 2004, 2012, and 2014 to 2020. The economy was stable with low inflation and interest rates. Prices of basic commodities remained low and stable. The Malawi Kwacha exchange rate was quite stable. And fiscal discipline and prudent public finance management remained the hallmark of the DPP administration, led by an intelligent and foresighted leader, Professor Arthur Peter Mutharika. Public debt was low and sustainable at 4.1 trillion. DPP was doing this to protect the economy and the Malawian people. This is the more reason, Madam Speaker, that DPP is certainly coming back into power in September 2025 to prevent MCP from further destroying the country. Madam Speaker, to put it simply, the running of the economy by MCP government is very chaotic with no signs of abating. DPP is deeply concerned with the increasing mismanagement and plunder of public sources under MCP. Madam Speaker, Malawi continues to move in a very dangerous trajectory and in a state of decline and collapse. Therefore, the DPP is making an urgent call to Malawians and various organizations of goodwill to rise up and declare that enough is enough. Malawians deserve a better government and a promising future. Sadly, Madam Speaker, due to MCP's poor policies, the cost of living has skyrocketed, poverty is rising astronomically, and development is being eroded before our very eyes. Since June 2020, the predatory nature of MCP administration witnessed increased corruption to unrepresented levels, whereby the plan of public resources has become the identity of MSP. Malawians are deeply shocked and concerned with MSP's indifference to their suffering. Madam Speaker, the signs are very clear for everyone to see that Malawi is becoming a failed state, and an urgent action is needed to salvage the situation. Let me now move to the state of the economy. Madam Speaker, let me preface my comments on the state of the economy by referring to what I said in March this year when I was responding to the 2024-2025 budget statement by the minister. I described the budget as unrealistic, unachievable, and consumptive. True to what I said, the minister has finally accepted and agreed to what we predicted. And he has also said in paragraph 10 of the budget statement that all the macroeconomic fundamentals have been missed. It is unfortunate, Madam Speaker, that this government has never prepared a credible budget. All budgets since 2020 have missed their targets. All assumptions have always been wrong and unrealistic. MCP government has failed to prepare a credible national budget. Most of the public resources are spent on consumption, unnecessary trips, corruption, and very little is spent on development. This is why, Madam Speaker, you don't see, that's why, Madam Speaker, you don't see development in all the districts in Malawi except in Lilongwe. Malawi is retrogressing, members, can I have order, and there's no development that is taking place. Madam Speaker, you don't see development in almost all the districts in Malawi except in Lilongwe. Malawi is retrogressing and there's no development taking place. Furthermore, Madam Speaker, DPP would also like to register concern on the downward revision of real GDP from the growth rate of 2.3% to 1.8% in 2024. At this rate of growth of the economy, it is unlikely that Malawi will achieve sustainable and inclusive economic development, and let alone meet the 2063 agenda. Madam Speaker, DPP is worried because if Malawi is to fast-track sustainable growth, it has to grow at an annual average growth rate of not less than 6% and higher than population growth. However, the Malawi economy has been growing at a miserable average rate of less than 2%, contrary to MCP's own manifesto. Madam Speaker, the projected income growth of 4% in 2025 is also unrealistic and unattainable to be achieved considering shortage of forex, fuel, fertilizers, and also rising food prices, which have a negative impact on productivity and economic growth. Furthermore, it will be impossible to grow the economy as long as the exchange rate, interest rates, and inflation remain high and unstable. Development will be achieved only if these macroeconomic fundamentals are stable and are moving in the right direction. Let me now tackle the issue of rising cost of living. Madam Speaker, the cost of living for an ordinary Malawian is rising every day. According to the Center for Social Concern Malawi, as of June 2020, the basic needs requirement for a household of 6 people in Lilongwe was 197,000 per month. And for Blantyre, it was 198,000 per month. The same households today, they require 586,000 in Blantyre, and in Lilongwe, 539,698 in Lilongwe, respectively, in order for them to meet their basic needs. Madam Speaker, You will agree with me that this is very sad, because Malawi is becoming poorer and poorer almost each and every day. Madam Speaker, this means that the cost of living in Blantyre has increased by 195%, while in Lilongwe it has increased by 173% since 2020. This trend also applies to all cities, towns, and districts in Malawi. This is happening against a background of declining disposable incomes and entitlements. As a result of the foregoing, Madam Speaker, most of the people in Malawi and in our cities can no longer afford to meet their basic needs such as food, house rentals, transport fares, and school fees for their children. Malawians are now much poorer in 2024 than they were in 2020. This is very pathetic, Madam Speaker. Maize and hunger situation. Madam Speaker, Malawians are living in acute hunger now than before. MCP administration has completely mismanaged the food situation. It lied to Malawians that they will be eating 3 times a day. Sadly, Madam Speaker, most Malawians cannot even afford one meal a day. As we speak today, a bag of maize is costing over 50,000 per 50 kg bag in most districts in Malawi. In contrast, Madam Speaker, the price of a bag of maize was only 8,000 per bag in 2020 when DPP left the government. The DPP government made sure that maize was available at an affordable price. Along with the poor harvest, currency devaluation, and inflation, Malawi's food insecurity has deteriorated, leaving 5.7 million people with nothing to eat. And these people require urgent assistance, food assistance, from now up to March 2025. It is sad, Madam Speaker, to note that Malawi ranks 93 out of 127 countries with hunger. This is as per the 2024 Global Hunger Index produced by the World Bank. This indicates, Madam Speaker, that Malawi has a serious and acute hunger situation. Malawians are now eating poisonous tubers, nyika, and chiteze, and the MCP seems not to care as people go to bed on an empty stomach. The MCP administration is slowly killing people with hunger. And people are dying, Madam Speaker, out there. Let me talk about inflation and interest rates, Madam Speaker. Madam Speaker, all signs are clear that MCP also is destroying the economy, which the DPP built over the years. This is the period when Professor Peter Mutharika was the state president, and yours truly, Honorable Joseph Machura Manamveka, was the Minister of Finance, Economic Planning and Development. Let me repeat, this was happening when Professor Peter Mutharika was the state president, a wise and dynamic leader who knew what he was doing, and he was doing what he knew. And you are truly, Honorable Joseph Manamveka Machura, was the Minister of Finance, Economic Planning and Development. Currently, inflation is at 35.4. I repeat, 35.4, compared to 8% as at 25 June 2020. You can imagine the movement and its impact on the lives of people. It is sad, Madam Speaker, that the prices of various commodities have substantially increased since 2020. Let me give you examples, Madam Speaker. Starting with exchange rate. As of 2020, the exchange rate was 7.35 to a dollar. But today, it is 3,200. Because that official rate is not the real exchange rate. Maize for 50 kg Maize for 50 kg was 8,000, but now it's over 50,000 kwacha. Fertilizer for 50 kg bag, it was 18,000 in 2020, now it's 120,000. Fuel, that's petrol, it was at 690, now it's 2,534. While diesel was 664, now is 2,754. Bread, now bread has become a rare commodity. It's only for the elite. The price was 395, now is 1,900. Brown sugar, it was 750, now is 3,000. Kukoma kumwelo, for 2 liters, 2,195, now is 18,000. Azam soap, it was 93 kwacha, now it is 1,000. So, Madam Speaker, you can actually see that Malawians are really suffering as a result of these price increases under the MCP government. Madam Speaker, it is so pathetic that MCP administration has also increased the interest rates in the banks, thereby making it difficult for people and the companies to borrow. And the Reserve Bank of Malawi has also hiked the policy rate to 26%, from 12% in 2020. At that time, I'm talking about at DPP time, it was much easier for businesses and ordinary people to access loans from banks. In this regard, MCP has made it tough for Malawians to get cheap loans for starting businesses, and instead, MCP administration is diverting funds to NIF, which is being used as a political tool to reward supporters, sympathizers, and family relations of MCP officials. Madam Speaker, we in the DPP demand that MCP must stop this abuse of NIF, cash transfer, as well as all government programs. Madam Speaker, on public debt, it is very sad that this clueless government is living on borrowed money. As a result of too much borrowing, public debt has now exceeded 15.1 trillion. When we are leaving government, Madam Speaker, public debt, all inclusive, all the debts inclusive, it was 4.1 trillion. But within 4 years, MCP has almost tripled the debt to 15.1. In addition, MCP continues to borrow for consumption and mostly to fund campaign programs which are disguised as development. The President has also undertaken over 60 trips since 2020, when our President only undertook 12 over a period of 6 years. But so this is only for 4 years, 60 trips, where the President has been accompanied by over 100 party sympathizers and family relations. Madam Speaker, too much borrowing means that the private sector and the businesses are crowded out and are not able to access cheap loans. MCP is killing small and medium enterprises, SMEs, with large-scale industries that are scaling down. DPP used to borrow cautiously and only spend the borrowed money on development projects. As I alluded above, Madam Speaker, loss of jobs. Madam Speaker, Malawians are asking, where are the promised 1 million jobs? I repeat, Mr. Finance Minister, Malawians are asking, where are the 1 million jobs? Instead of creating jobs, Malawians are becoming jobless. Businesses are closing down. ADMAC has been closed down. The Power Markets Limited has been closed down. People's Superes have been closed down. Rainbow TV have closed down. Joy TV has closed down. And some of the subsidiaries for Auction Holdings have closed down. The list is long. The point is, Malawi is losing thousands of jobs instead of creating jobs. Government cannot even pay youth on internship on time. This is a program that DPP had initiated, but MCP is failing to manage it. On foreign exchange reserves and fuel scarcity, Madam Speaker, this administration is pathetically clueless on how to manage the monetary policy. The kwacha continues to lose value against the US dollar and other major currencies. The black market rate, as I said earlier, is at 3,200 to a dollar. Forex reserves have dwindled to dangerously low levels of less than 2 weeks of import cover. MCP has mismanaged the economy to the extent that it is failing to pay the country's essential imported commodities such as fuel, fertilizers, and medicines. In contrast, Madam Speaker, DPP government managed Forex very well, such that in 2020, Malawi was sitting on the highest levels of Forex with 6 months import cover. Sadly, today, MCP administration has subjected the Malawians to long queues because government has mismanaged Forex. Hospitals are running out of essential medicines because MCP does not know and has no clue on how to manage the foreign exchange. The fuel shortage has reached critical levels. Business have come to a standstill. People can no longer easily make travel plans. The fuel crisis is pushing prices of other essential commodities. Like today, I think the prices of soft drinks has increased. I'm sure you have seen it, Madam Speaker. The fuel crisis is pushing up prices of other essential commodities such as bus fares, which has almost doubled. MCP is so clueless on how to manage the situation as motorists spend sleepless nights on long fuel queues. Malawians are subject to torture and they are forced to pay high prices in order to secure fuel. Fuel is selling 8,000 per litre in the black market. Madam Speaker, this government does not care about the suffering of people. Madam Speaker, I would like to caution the recent amendment of the MAREP fuel levy and the change of the mode of procurement to G mode of procurement. I hope, Madam Speaker, or the Minister of Finance, you have noted what has happened in Kenya. After they have cancelled, they have terminated the G to G because it has not helped the economy in Kenya. The solution, Mr. Minister, is foreign exchange. If you have foreign exchange, you have fuel, you have food, you have fertilizer, and you have also medicine in hospitals. It's not the mode of procurement that matters. On the roads and the public infrastructure, it is also unfortunate that the MCP administration is neglecting crucial roads and infrastructure which are key to the development of the country. MCP is only concentrating in the wrong way. And it has forgotten all the districts. For example, in the north, you have forgotten Chiweta Mlowe Road. You have forgotten Rumpi Ntalire Chitipa Road. You have forgotten Ilomba Road in Chitipa. Just to mention, in the Luxor area, Madam Speaker, MCP has forgotten Nkota Maromunchis Road. It has forgotten M5, the Luxor Road. And also they have forgotten in Kaika Mansambo to Kasakura Road. What MCP knows is the wrong way. In the southern region, MCP has neglected the Tabwa Mona Fatima Road. They have forgotten the Lilangwe Chingale Machinga Road, the Kameza Chileka Airport Road, and MCP does not seem not to care. All they care about is Lilongwe. And the current administration is Lilongwe. Madam Speaker, as we all know that DPP never sidelined any district,
Can I have
any
order,
district
Can we hear
or
the
region.
honorable member in silence, please?
As we all know, DPP never sidelined any district or region. It initiated projects across the country, regardless of whether or not it is getting support in that district or region. DPP negotiated with the Chinese government on the construction of M1 from Crossroads to Lumbas. And we signed it. And we negotiated and signed the contract.
As on my right,
We
can I have order, please? No, Salima Southwest,
also signed
order.
the contract with the European
Order,
Union.
please, Delta East, order.
We signed
please.
the European Investment Bank on the M1 road from Lumbas to Nzimba. It's DPP. We also negotiated and signed a contract with the Japanese government on the road from Bunda Tenov to Crossroads. And Iwa Trure was the one who signed those contracts. After my president, Professor Tapita Mutharika, had negotiated with these governments. Madam Speaker, we also constructed the air wing Kasia Sande Road to make sure that the current president is able to travel properly to his village. We did Imponera Nchisi Road and the Kampata Koma Road. Furthermore, it is DPP that initiated and commissioned water projects in Katabe, in Karonga, in Nzimba, and Chitipa, and even in Rumbi. And Madam Speaker, I'm happy to report this because I know we also did a road going to Akoswese. DPP also constructed a magnificent Nkatabe District Hospital. It is also the DPP that constructed the Rumpi TTC and Rumpi TTC and also Nchingi TTC. DPP initiated the construction and maintenance of Nsanje Malaka Road, the Tabamona Mafatima Road, and the Chikwa TTC. DPP is, however, pleased, Madam Speaker, that the MCP is launching and opening development projects that were initiated by DPP.
Order.
Before I conclude, Madam Speaker, allow me to briefly comment. Madam Speaker, allow me to briefly comment on the government reforms and the policies and programs that the Minister of Finance has highlighted in the midterm budget. It is sad that the Minister has not stipulated concrete measures and strategies that will enable the management of public resources and also improve public service delivery. Going through the reforms, Madam Speaker, it is not clear what strategies the Minister wants to pursue and the modus operandi on how these reforms will be implemented. The reforms are just empty and mere rhetoric. Finally, Madam Speaker, the revenue enhancement measures with regard to removal of VAT waiver for the privileged individuals, the implementation of electronic excise tax stamps, and the modernization of the electronic payment system will not have any impact in generating more revenue as expected by government. For example, on the removal of VAT waiver on motor vehicles for privileged individuals, most beneficiaries of this facility have already benefited, and this facility is not available on an annual basis, but rather for a specific period. And for MPs, it's for 5 years. With regard to with tax stamps and electronic payments modernization, These are not new and have been ongoing for some years without meaningful impact. Finally, Madam Speaker, I would like to urge the Minister to completely remove, I repeat, I will urge the Minister to completely remove the voluntary tax compliance window for motorcycle operators, Kabaza. I'm saying this, Madam Speaker, because I consider this measure as inhuman, it's cruel, and inconsiderate to the dignity of poor Malawians who are working hard to survive
Member,
and feed their families.
You just have a minute to go. You've exhausted your 30 minutes.
1 minute, I'll finish. In 1 minute, I'll finish. I'm saying this voluntary window for Kabaza is inhuman and cruel and inconsiderate for the poor Malawians who are working hard to survive and feed their families. This is in hazard at its best. The Minister should remove this measure and go back to his drawing board and find better ways of enhancing revenue. There are so many of them. And Madam Speaker, I'm available should there be need for consultants. DPP observes with serious concern and sometimes laughable how MCP and this collapsing Tose administration has desperately pointed fingers for DPP for every blunder they have committed. They accuse DPP for all their inabilities and for their mistakes. Today, we would like to call upon Malawians to reject these lies. Madam Speaker, this is the time for Malawians to rise up and denounce MCP's empty rhetoric. The people must join and call upon MCP to stop the economic persecution being inflicted on Malawians. Now is the time to tell MCP to vacate, particularly the president, to vacate the State House, because our president, Professor Zabita Mutharika, is ready to go to State House on 16th September 2025. Madam Speaker, I beg to move.
The Honorable Spokesperson from DPP. Spokesperson from UDF.
Thank you very much, Madam Speaker, for granting the United Democratic Front the opportunity to respond to the reviewed media budget and offer some solutions to the many financial challenges facing our nation today. The UDF has carefully reviewed the revised budget statement delivered by the Minister of Finance and Economic Affairs, Honorable Simplex Abanda MP. This is a revision of the 2024-2025 fiscal year budget under the theme From Economic Recovery to Resilience through accelerating production and enhancing the legal and regulatory environment to protect the economy. Madam Speaker, the UDF does not take lightly the responsibility of providing sober and actionable suggestions to the government on matters affecting our nation. In other words, the UDF's sole responsibility is to stand with the people of Malawi, especially in difficult times like these. The revised budget statement reveals that Malawi has underperformed economically over the first half of the fiscal year. We note that the measures to enhance revenue generation are inadequate and will not be impactful over the next 3 months to justify the revenue forecast. While we also note that the government has made commendable revisions, key areas of good governance and the economy remain inadequately addressed. If you could refer back to the budget response the UDF made in this August House in February of 2024, in which we had highlighted critical economic challenges and had therefore proposed measures that had the aim of enhancing resilience and local productivity. Unfortunately, the entirely implausible outturn of the media performance and the revised budget reveal limited progress in addressing those particular challenges. The UDF's response had focused on 8 key areas that would have improved by transforming our financial trajectory and would have helped the government recover from the subsequent effects of the natural disasters we had experienced and the economic downturn the nation is currently enduring. It is rather strongly evidenced from the recent media budget review statement that the UDF's advice was not taken into consideration. Madam Speaker, the following are our latest observations and recommendations. Number 1, media performance, domestic borrowing and budget deficit. The UDF is concerned about the decline in the media performance on domestic debt, which continues to finance the already out of control fiscal deficit. Borrowing for consumption will plunge our nation into destitution. The Honorable Minister cited that lower than expected revenues were collected over the first half. This is no surprise to the UDF because A, the initial budget had an expenditure mismatch with more resources allocated to recurrent expenditure rather than to development or investment expenditure. We cannot expect the revenue growth we earn with such imprudent budgeting strategies. B, the interventions that the Honorable Minister cited in the initial budget do not have the immediate impact on the revenue generation capacity of our nation. C, the much-touted growth sectors remain underdeveloped with inadequate budgetary allocations. D, the challenges faced by small medium enterprises in accessing affordable financing are systematic and require deliberate remedial policies to overcome them. For the SME sector is critical for the transformation of the local economy. We are not going to become financially free and less dependent on donor aid. We will have to invest a little more aggressively in our own people, the indigenous Malawians. A, agricultural output remains low despite the Ministry of Finance and Economic Affairs making assurances to this National Assembly that significant project funding was available. However, the mega farm unit has still not been funded with the 86 billion kwacha requirement, which is key for operationalizing this pivotal project. The question is, why are we still failing to take advantage of and benefit from the existing low-hanging fruits? For example, the World Bank and the African Development Bank joined hands and co-financed the Shire Valley Transformation Program. This is the biggest investment in the irrigation subsector, which was designed to see the development of irrigation facilities for 43,370 hectares in Sanje and Chikwawa. The cost of this program, phase 1 alone, is about $234.6 million US, being the equivalent of about 402 billion kwacha. The World Bank on its own had implemented the Agriculture Commercialization Project, whose purpose was to increase commercialization of agriculture value chain products, and whose total budget was $95 million US, translating to about 163 billion kwacha. The African Development Bank had implemented the Malawi Infrastructure and Youth in Agribusiness Project, whose total funding was $21.8 million US, the equivalent of about 37 billion kwacha. The objectives of this project were to support the development of irrigation infrastructure in order to facilitate the development of high-value food crop production, agricultural value chains, along with the agribusiness skills and capacity building for youth. The European Union has implemented the $113.5 million US or 195 billion kwacha Kulima project in the districts of Chitipa, Karonga, Nzimba, Nkarabe Kasungu, Korakota, Salima Chiraju, Cholo, and Mulanje. This project supports extension services through farmer field schools, agricultural research, access to finance through blending with European Investment Bank and value chains. IFAD is also implementing the program for rural irrigation development, which aims at enhancing rural Malawi communities' resilience to food insecurity and the adverse effects of climate change, also transforming agriculture through diversification, and entrepreneurship programs. Furthermore, several other donor partners have channeled their financial and technical commitments towards other agricultural activities, such as the 5 billion kwacha for AGCOM. Madam Speaker, despite all these astronomical amounts of funds having been allocated by the government itself or the donor partners on behalf of the government, the people of Malawi remain regrettably dependent on donor aid, extremely poor, food insecure, and with no access to affordable agribusiness financing. The current situation is such that the economy of Malawi is predominantly agriculture-based. Agriculture accounts for 30% of the GDP and generates 80% of the national export earnings. The agriculture sector employs 64% of the country's workforce and contributes to food and nutrition security. There is potential for better production and productivity. However, the agriculture sector is maliciously allowed to continue to operate below its true capacity. Number 2, revised projections. Madam Speaker, the UDF would like to point out that the revised budget increasingly appears to be unrealistic because, A, despite recording revenue underperformance of 8.2% at mid-year, the projected revenue is projected to increase by 0.01% from the initial budget. The UDF notes that this target may be unattainable. B, the UDF notes that while the removal of the VAT waiver for the so-called privileged individuals and organizations is only a good political gesture, its true impact on domestic revenue generation is uncertain and hugely insignificant to begin to contribute towards reducing the national deficit. C, the UDF also notes that the other proposed revenue enhancement measures have inherent implementation challenges, which will negatively affect their success and their expected impact on revenue generation. The government needs to purposefully engage with all relevant stakeholders for the smooth implementation of these new measures. D, consequently, the UDF feels that in the huge absence of practical and deliberate investments in import substitution, the projected reduction in the fiscal deficit may be unattainable. Madam Speaker, we note with concern that the proposed measures in the revised budget do not have a certain and immediate impact on the challenges facing Malawians right now. For example, number 1, the scarcity of forex. The UDF would like to propose that the government must decisively deal with the scarcity of forex in the local economy vis-à-vis the commercial banks. The government must equally deal with the thriving forex black market, which is largely being fueled by illicit trade and corruption. The UDF feels that the underperformance in relation to grants is unwelcome, as this is currently a viable and reliable alternate source of forex. This recurring shortage of forex on the market is driving up the rate of food inflation, as well as non-food inflation, which are both currently extremely volatile. Number 2, high unemployment rates. The UDF has taken note of the positive efforts to reduce the high unemployment rates in the country. We would like to encourage the government to seek employment for youths outside the country for the purposes of providing jobs as well as earning the much needed forex. Preliminary figures for the year 2023 from the research website Statista revealed that Filipinos working in the United Arab Emirates sent around 1.35 billion US dollars or 2.3 trillion kwacha in cash remittances to their home country, and that Filipinos that sought employment across the globe amounted to about 1.3 million people. However, it must be noted that it is globally believed that Filipinos provide quality labor. They are hardworking, not lazy, intelligent, and are able to communicate in English rather expertly. Most of them having bachelor's degrees, and most importantly, they have amazing personalities, qualities that the government of Malawi through the ministries of education and labor must begin to instill and invest in its people if the government is to benefit from this hugely underutilized human capital. Number 3, the burden of debt. The UDF notes the positive steps taken by the government in reducing the burden of debt on the economy through the agreement that has been reached on debt restructuring with the government of China. In our view, the restructuring will offer some relief in reducing the suffering of our people if these resources will ultimately be channeled towards impactful interventions in accordance with PRM1 for the Vision 2063, as well as the ATM strategy. In the year 2000, the UDF government applied for the HIPI program, which in the year 2006 saw the national debt being reduced from about 3 trillion kwacha to about 800 billion kwacha. This is one of the strategies the UDF would like to implore the Minister of Finance and the entire government machinery at his disposal to tirelessly pursue. Number 4, crowding out. The UDF strongly proposes that the government should enhance revenue growth by promoting and empowering private sector productivity by deliberately moving out of the market sector in which its current dominating presence is staffing out local private creativity, diversification, and investment. We also encourage the government to continue with its efforts to make the public sector more efficient by digitizing financial processes, ending corruption, and terminating bureaucratic and administrative procedures that are overly complicated, time-consuming, and burdensome, which often frustrate local service delivery. In conclusion, the UDF wishes to point out that the economic status of our nation will worsen if we face perennial fiscal deficits arising from the increasing levels of political commitments which coerce ruling parties to continue borrowing domestically and externally. If the government of Malawi is bankrupt and poor, let us come out and sincerely inform our people so that we can begin to live below our means. Madam Speaker, the UDF calls on the government and its entire machinery to dedicate all its efforts to reduce the suffering of our citizens by beginning to provide the essential public goods and services which the people of Malawi are constitutionally entitled to. Madam Speaker, God bless Malawi and God bless the mighty United Democratic Front, the only political party here to have won the general elections 3 times consecutively and continue to serve Malawians diligently through other mediums. Boma, Ndilomweli na UDF. Thank you very much, Madam Speaker.
Very much, spokesperson of UDF. Thank you. I now call upon the chairperson of the Budget Committee. Are you standing in for the chair of the Budget Committee? You have the floor. Member for Cholo Tava. Are you a member of the Budget Committee? Okay. Switch on? Yes. Can you please assist?
Thank you very much, Right Honorable Speaker. Good afternoon. On behalf of the people of Chotaba, I would like to thank the Honorable Chairperson and the entire committee for allowing the people of Chotaba to represent the committee's report. Madam
Tap your
Speaker,
voice a little bit. And can we reduce the background noises, please?
Madam Speaker, I rise to present the Budget Committee's response to the 2024-2025 mid-year budget review as ably presented by the Honorable Minister of Finance on the 4th of December 2024. While we commend the government for its efforts, the committee has once again identified critical areas that require urgent attention to ensure fiscal sustainability and economic recovery. Madam Speaker, the challenges we face are significant, but with decisive action and prudent management, the committee believes we can stabilize the economy and set Malawi on a path toward sustainable growth and development. On general economic developments, Madam Speaker, Malawi's economic growth has been significantly revised downward from 3.2% to 1.8% for 2024, far below the MIP1 target of 6%. This stagnation is primarily driven by the lingering effects of drought, foreign exchange shortages, and global economic pressures. The committee reiterates the urgent need to diversify our economy and strengthen the agriculture sector, which remains vulnerable to climate shocks. Madam Speaker, inflation remains alarmingly high, projected to average 33.5% in 2024, far exceeding the Reserve Bank of Malawi medium-term target of 5% and the MIP1 target of less than 10%. Food inflation, particularly driven by rising maize prices, reached 40.3% in October 2024. The committee calls on the government to invest in agricultural diversification and irrigation infrastructure to reduce reliance on rain-fed maize farming and stabilize food prices. Madam Speaker, the liquidity reserve requirement ratio on domestic currency was recently increased by 125 basis points to 10% to curb inflation, but its effectiveness remains in question. The committee recommends that the Ministry of Finance collaborate with the Central Bank to assess alternative monetary tools to manage inflation while safeguarding credit availability, particularly for small and medium enterprises. Madam Speaker, the committee noted with concern the widening trade deficit, which reached $193 million in September 2024. Imports of fuel, fertilizer, and machinery continued to surge, while export growth remains stagnant. To address this, the committee urges the government to prioritize export diversification and implement import substitution strategies to reduce our dependence on imports and enhance foreign exchange reserves. Madam Speaker, the decline in foreign exchange reserves to 0.5 months of import cover is a serious threat to our economic stability. The committee strongly recommends that the government cease the practice of including commercial bank reserves in official reserves figures and instead focus on building sustainable reserves through improved domestic revenue mobilization and enhanced export performance. Madam Speaker, on fiscal policy, high public debt and rising debt servicing costs have constrained fiscal space. The committee calls for continued renegotiation of loan terms to reduce the debt burden and for new borrowing to be strictly limited to projects with clear economic returns. Strengthening institution capacity to reduce implementation delays and wasteful expenditures is also critical. Performance of the first half of 2024-2025 fiscal year, Madam Speaker, allow me to now move into the committee's observations on the fiscal performance for the first half of the 2024-2025 year. Madam Speaker, the committee's analysis revealed that total revenue and grants underperformed by 22.3%, with collections amounting to 1.727 trillion against a mid-year target of 2.222 trillion. Domestic revenue financed only 67.1% of recurrent expenditure, below the target of 71.2%. Tax revenue underperformed by 7.7%, and non-tax revenue discrepancies raised transparency concerns. Grants underperformed by 61.8%, despite the minister's claim of restored donor confidence. The committee recommends that the government must strengthen domestic resource mobilization, adopt realistic revenue projections, and engage development partners to improve grant reliability. Madam Speaker, the total expenditure at mid-year was 2.68 trillion, falling short of the target by 14.2%, primarily due to underperformance in the development expenditure, which missed its target by 446.6 billion. Recurrent expenditure slightly underperformed, but personal involvements exceed the target by 25%, driven by salary adjustment and new recruitments. On statutory expenditures, the committee noted that some non-statutory items such as allocation to NIF and higher education student loans are budgeted under this line, thereby allowing the adjustments without involving Parliament. The committee recommends that the minister should prioritize development expenditures, control wage bill growth, and implement personal audits to align payroll with domestic revenue, in addition to ensuring proper alignment of the statutory board. Madam Speaker, development expenditure accounted for only 16.4% of total expenditure, far below the target of 28.4%. Both foreign and domestically financed projects underperformed significantly due to delays in contract price adjustment, foreign scarcity, and other bottlenecks. The committee recommends that the government streamlines project management, address foreign shortages, and ensure timely implementation of critical development projects. Madam Speaker, the fiscal deficit in EDS stood at 950.92 billion, exceeding the target by 5.99%, with domestic financing accounting for 95.5% of the deficit. Rising foreign interest payments raise concerns about the external debt sustainability. Madam Speaker, the government should rebalance financing strategies, reduce reliance on domestic borrowing, and prioritize concessional external financing to ensure fiscal sustainability. Right Honourable Speaker, statutory expenditures, including pensions and debt servicing, showed mixing performance. Pensions and gratuities exceeding their target, but long-standing arrears persist, affecting senior citizens. The committee recommends that the government should reverse reductions in pensions provisions and prioritize clearing arrears to restore dignity to retirees and reduce fiscal risk from court claims. Madam Speaker, the committee also noted inefficiencies in the management of goods and services, with actual expenditure falling short of the mid-year target by 13.6%. These inefficiencies have led to delayed payments and arrears, disrupting small businesses and parastatals. The minister should adopt a disciplined approach to managing expenditures, ensure timely payments, and prevent further economic strain on small business and banking sector. Madam Speaker, moving on, allow me to focus on the observations on the 2024-2025 revised mid-year budget. I will begin with changes on the revenue side. Madam Speaker, the committee observed that the total revenues and grants were revised upward by 74.01 billion from 4.552 trillion to 4.626 trillion, representing a modest increase of 1.63%. This adjustment was driven largely by upward revision in grants, which contributed 97.2% of the additional revenue. While the revision is welcomed, the committee remains concerned about the persistence and the performance of grants, a recurring issue in the fiscal years. For instance, grants from foreign governments have been maintained at 72.7 billion, despite falling short by 88.2% of mid-year target. This does not inspire confidence in the projections, Madam Speaker. Domestic revenues were also revised upward, although marginally by 2.04 billion from 3.383 trillion to 3.385 trillion, reflecting a 0.59% increase. The increase stems primarily from anticipated gains in non-tax revenues, particularly mineral royalties. The committee hopes that this projection of the adjustment in the mineral royalties revenue is realistic, especially since they generated 858 million in the first half, despite being excluded from the initial estimates. However, the committee is concerned that both tax and non-tax revenues have generally underperformed relative to their targets, yet the revised projections remain unchanged. This raises questions about whether these figures reflect genuine expectations or an attempt to present a more favorable fiscal outlook by avoiding downward revisions. This is critical as it has direct implications in the outturn of debt at the end of the fiscal year. Madam Speaker, the committee also noted several revenue enhancement measures, such as the removal of VAT waivers on motor vehicle imports for privileged individuals like President, ministers, and members of Parliament, the implementation of electronic excise tax stamps, and expanding electronic payment system across revenue collecting entities. The measures are indeed steps towards broadening the tax base, improving compliance, and increasing transparency. The committee noted that the import VAT estimates have remained unchanged at 490.6 billion. The committee therefore seeks to understand what impact the removal of VAT waivers on motor vehicles import for the privileged individuals will have on the projected revenue for the remainder of the fiscal financial year. Madam Speaker, allow me to move to analysis of the proposed expenditure revisions of the 2024-25 budget. In the 2024-25 revised budget, overall, expenditure has slightly been revised upwards by 41.54 billion to 6.040 trillion from the 5.99 trillion approved estimate. This 41.54 billion increase is expenditure in the 2024-25 revised budget is a net effect of 178.811 billion increase in recurrent expenditure and 187.271 billion decrease in development expenditure, Madam Speaker. On recurrent expenditure, Madam, the committee noted that the recurrent expenditure has increased in the 2024 revised budget by 178.81 billion kwacha to 4.456 trillion from 4.277 trillion kwacha, representing a 4.18% increase. It now claims 73.78% of the total revised budget from 71.30% in the approved budget. This increase is largely on account of upwards revision in allocation towards wages and salaries, use of goods and services, and other statutory expenses, which have offset the slight cuts in grants and social benefits. The committee has noted a significant increase in the allocation towards wages and salaries by 192.78 billion kwacha, raising the total of 1.28 trillion, which represents a 1871% increase from the approved budget. This adjustment, Madam Speaker, now accounting for 28.65% of total recurrent expenditure, is attributed to salary adjustment and additional recruitments. While we recognize the wages and salaries are mandatory expenditure, we strongly urge the government to strengthen its planning process. Comprehensive consideration of hiring needs and salary adjustment during budget preparation is essential to avoid this substantial mid-year increase, which contributes to rising debt financing. This practice is unchecked. If unchecked, could undermine fiscal sustainability. I think the Honourable Minister has taken note. Madam Speaker, the committee also noted an upward adjustment in the allocation of goods and services, now standing at 971.7 billion, which represents a 10.15% increase. This rise is largely driven by significant allocations for men's purchase and a slight increase in other areas, including generic goods, agriculture sector, and arrears. The committee has also noted a significant reduction in health sector budget allocation for operations, which is 19 billion, despite the increased recruitment of workers in the sector. The committee is of the view that the newly recruited workers will likely bring minimal impact in service delivery due to lack of necessary tools and medical equipment for their work. Madam Speaker, by now we can all agree that Malawi's hunger is a perennial problem. We spend a significant amount of resources in response initiatives. In the revised budget, Madam Speaker, allocation to maize purchase has been increased sixfold, from 22 billion to 124.96 billion Malawi kwacha, representing a 268% increase. While the committee appreciates the government efforts to address the current hunger, the committee continues to urge the government to seriously consider more sustainable solutions, such as investing in irrigation, resilient crop varieties, and robust food supply chains. The committee is further aware that allocation towards AIP has also revised downwards by 29.70 billion kwacha, and this has affected the number of beneficiaries on the program. The committee calls for an explanation for the reduction, as it may affect food production for some Malawians. Madam Speaker, the committee noted that allocation towards interest payments has been maintained at 1.456 trillion kwacha, which both foreign and domestic interest estimates remaining constant. The committee is skeptical about these estimates given the movements that have occurred in interest rates and exchange rates in the course of the year. The committee is further aware of the resource mobilization challenges in the first half that led to domestic borrowing exceeding its target by 85.9 billion kwacha. The committee therefore calls the minister to clarify why these estimates have remained unchanged. Madam Speaker, the annual budget for pensions and gratuities have been reduced by 20.3 billion kwacha. The committee highlights the persistent arrears, some over 2 or 3 years old, which deprive retired public servants of proper livelihoods. It urges the government, the minister, to reserve the budget cut and prioritize clearing these long-standing arrears to address the financial hardships faced by our retirees. Madam Speaker, the committee is deeply concerned about the significant reduction in the development budget, which has decreased by 187.27 billion kwacha from from 1.2772 trillion to 1.584 trillion. It now claims 26% of the total revised budget, a drop from 29.53% in the approved budget. The committee noted that this reduction is attributed to challenges in project implementation. For years, we have raised concerns over inefficiencies and delays in development projects. These systematic challenges continue to undermine the progress in key sectors. The committee therefore calls upon the Honourable Minister of Finance to provide Parliament with specific measures and reforms being implemented to address these inefficiencies. Malawi cannot afford to continue losing opportunities for growth due to weak project management and delayed contractual agreements. The overall budget balance, Madam Speaker, the revised budget projects at a reduction in the deficit of 32.48 billion kwacha from 1.45 trillion to 1.41 trillion, driven by revenue growth outpacing expenditures increases. While the committee commends efforts to reduce the deficit, the committee remains skeptical, noting that total financing for the first half of the year was 950.9 billion, while the projection for the second half stands at 463.2 billion, which is less than half of the first half figure. Realization of this reduced balance hinders on improved revenue mobilization, which has underperformed in the first half of the year. These disparities raise concerns about the feasibility of meeting financing needs in the later half of the year. Madam Speaker, I will now briefly highlight a few votes that have experienced some significant changes in the revised budget. The committee noted that allocation of the Ministry of Agriculture has significantly increased from 480.37 billion to 555.53 billion kwacha, representing a 15.6% increase. Of the additional 75.16 billion, 72.39 billion is recurrent expenditure, while 2.76 billion is capital expenditure. The committee would like to call the minister to explain these increments. The committee's engagements have revealed that the Mega Farm Initiative needs extra 86.0 billion funding to effectively implement their activities in the remaining half of the year. The committee hence asks the minister to make consideration cognizant of the role the initiative can play in addressing the current forex and food crisis. The committee also noted significant increase in allocation toward the security sector, which the Malawi Defense Force and Malawi Police Service receiving 32.1 billion and 19.7 billion respectively. The committee calls for an explanation for these significant increase. Madam Speaker, allow me to summarize the key recommendations. As I conclude, I would like to emphasize the committee's key recommendations for the 2024-2025 mid-year budget review. On missed MIP 1 target, the committee calls for the channeling efforts on economic growth through building climate resilient farming techniques and investing in irrigation infrastructure to reduce the sector's vulnerability to droughts and extreme weather. Weather shocks have proved to have profound effects on the agriculture sector and the economy of the whole. Failure to grow will mean perpetuation of the MIP1 growth targets. Accelerate economic diversification in sectors with high potential like mining for more stable and diversified economic growth drivers. Review of liquidity reserve requirement effectiveness. Given the persistent increase in broad money supply,
Despite the recent adjustment of the liquidity reserve requirement from 8.7% to 10%, the committee recommends an assessment by the monetary authority to effectiveness of LRR adjustment in managing money supply and inflation, whether necessary alternative or complementary monetary tools should be considered to address inflationary pressures more effectively. In order to address the negative trade balance, the committee urges the government to intensify export diversification, import substitution, and improve foreign exchange management to address trade deficit and build sustainable revenues. To manage food inflation, Madam Speaker, which is particularly driven by rising maize prices, the committee calls on the government to invest in agricultural diversification and irrigation infrastructure to reduce reliance on rain-fed maize farming and stabilize food prices. Madam Speaker, on revenue mobilization, the committee calls upon the government to strengthen domestic revenue correction mechanisms and adopt realistic revenue projections. Further to this, the ministry should enhance engagement with development partners to improve grant reliability. Government should reduce dependence on unpredictable grants and revenues. This can be done through diversification of domestic revenue sources to stabilize fiscal framework. Investing in local resources mobilization initiatives will also provide more consistent and controllable revenue base. The committee has observed that late disbursement of funds by some development partners affects implementation of some projects. The committee urges donors to honor their commitment in order to ensure successful and timely execution of these initiatives. While the committee applauds the effort to contain expenditures and reduce overall budget deficit, it remains skeptical, especially given that total financing in the first half amounted to 950.9 billion, while the projection for the second half is 463.2 billion kwacha, less than 50% of the first half total financing. The committee urges the government to exercise diligence with the management of the wage bill as it is growing exponentially, therefore crowding out essential services. Furthermore, the committee continues to encourage the government to make all necessary hiring and salary adjustment considerations during the budget preparations to avoid significant increases in the wage bill in the course of the year, which leads to increased debt financing. On the persistent challenge of project implementation, the committee calls upon the Honorable Minister of Finance and Economic Affairs to provide Parliament with specific measures and reforms being implemented to address these inefficiencies. Debt management, the committee continues to urge government to continue renegotiating loan terms to ease the debt burden and ensure new borrowing is strictly for projects with high economic returns. To address the perennial challenges of hunger, the committee recommends serious investing in long-term agricultural solutions, including irrigation and resilient crops varieties and sustainable food production strategies. On statutory expenditures, the committee recommends that non-statutory items such as allocation to NIF and higher education student loans be moved from the statutory expenditures vote to their relevant votes. In conclusion, Madam Speaker, the committee acknowledges the efforts made in revising the 2024-25 budget to address pressing economic challenges. However, the success of these adjustments hinges on effective implementation of fiscal discipline, enhanced revenue mobilization, and decisive action on key structural reforms. The committee therefore
urges the government to prioritize sustainability solutions that address food security, debt management, forex shortages, and implementation in efficiencies to ensure Malawi's economy sustainability and long-term growth. Together, let us work towards a future where every kwacha is spent effectively, efficiently, and equitably. Madam Speaker, on this note, I wish to thank you and the whole House for your attention. I thank you.
Very much, Cholo Tava, standing in for Chair of Budget Committee. Honorable members, well, we are almost, it's almost time for break for health break, but we'll recognize honorable members immediately. I've seen Lilongwe Mpenu. I'll give you the floor. Are you standing to contribute? Yes, because it's almost 3:30, we'll start contributing immediately after resumption of sitting. Honorable members, it is 3:30. I now suspend proceedings for health break. We shall resume sitting at 4 p.m. House suspended.
Osaiwala kupanga subscribe ku channel ya AMTV Malawi.